And missing the idiom, translators try different ways to literally interpret this cultural idiom, having a good eye. And you can see how all of those miss the mark. Thanks for coming back to watch another video supplement to the book Walking in the Dust of Rabbi Jesus by Lois Verberg. I'm Samantha Corcoran, and today we'll cover Chapter 5, Gaining a Good Eye. The way Lois introduces us to this Hebrew idiom, gaining a good eye, is using the book Amelia Bedelia. Now, if you read that as a kid or you're reading it to your kids, it is hilarious, all of the misunderstandings. And it actually reminded me of a hilarious article I read recently in the Biblical Archaeology Society, and I've got that linked down below. It's all about how do translators tackle the book Fox and Socks. And the authors are using Fox and Socks to talk about how translators of the Bible attempt to translate idioms, right? You've probably read this Dr. Seuss classic, New socks, two socks. Whose socks? Sue's socks. Who sews whose socks? Sue sews Sue's socks. Okay, so that's hilarious in English and quite the tongue twister. What if you had to translate that into a different language? How would that work? And what if the language you're translating to doesn't have a direct equivalent? Interestingly, the word for fox in Hebrew, shual, is not in the title of the book, Fox and Socks. It's not Shual and Socks. It actually translates to comes in socks. And it has to do with the alliteration in Hebrew and making it make sense in the Hebrew language. So Fox and Socks in Hebrew is baim garbaim. He came with socks, or comes in socks. So you can see it's not quite the same. Thinking about translations, maybe now is a good time to pause and actually talk about the different types of Bible translations that we have today, how they're made, and how that helps us to understand what we're reading. So this chart shows a spectrum from literal word-for-word translation to paraphrase, which is more of a thought-for-thought translation. In the literal word-for-word category, we have the New American Standard, the English Standard Version, King James, and the New King James Version. In the middle of the road, we've got our Christian Standard Version, New Revised Standard Version, New International Version, and New Living Translation. These are a combination of word-for-word and thought-for-thought. And on the far side of the spectrum, we have the paraphrase translations, which includes the New International Reader's Version, the Living Bible, and the Message. Now, they're trying to communicate more of the thoughts behind what we're reading, not a direct word-for-word translation. Now, it's actually a good practice to read the same verse in multiple translations, and now you can see what you're getting with each translation. So let's take Matthew 6:42. How is this translated across this spectrum of translation? Well, let's start with the literal word for word. NASB says, the eye is the lamp of the body. So then, if your eye is clear, your whole body will be full of light. Let's move to the middle and take the NIV. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. Let's move on to the paraphrase, and we'll take the Living Bible. If your eye is pure, there will be sunshine in your soul. So you can see the difference between methods of translation for Matthew 6:22. Interestingly, no translator caught the Hebrew idiom gaining a good eye, or the meaning of gaining a good eye, which, as Lois explains to us, is having an eye toward generosity, being generous. And missing the idiom, translators try different ways to literally interpret this cultural idiom, having a good eye. And so NASB says clear, NIV says healthy, the Living Bible says pure. And you can see how all of those miss the mark when it comes to this Hebrew idiom of having a good eye. In Matthew 6:22, Lois explains that Jesus is really comparing having a good eye, ayin tovah, with having a bad eye, ayin ra'ah. And Lois helps us understand that when Jesus is referring to the I in Matthew 6:22, that it's all about a person's attitude toward others. Either you're very generous, ayin tovah, you have a beautiful eye, a good eye, or you're very stingy and you have an evil eye, ayin ra'ah. Lois gives us some great examples of gaining a good eye, this ayin tovah, and she starts with Acts chapter 2. What did the early disciples do? Well, they shared everything they had. Those who had land sold it to make sure that everyone's needs were taken care of. They shared everything. They were generous. They had a good eye. And Lois also reminds us of women like Joanna and Susanna, who were some of Jesus's wealthy patrons that funded his ministry. The final example in this chapter that Lois gives us to have a good eye is thinking about the concept of Gemilut Hasadim, which comes from the word Hesed, which is loving kindness. So think of Ruth and Boaz or Ruth and Naomi. The Bible Project has a fantastic video about Chesed, and so I've linked that up above here. And they talk about Ruth especially. There is a lot of Chesed in Ruth. And so you look at gleaning of grain, right? That was commanded back in Leviticus. So leaving a strip of grain on your field for the poor and the widows to harvest, that is showing ayin tovah, a good eye, right? That's being generous. Having a good eye or a bad eye all goes back to our view of God. Do we believe that He is the generous host who will care for our needs and is concerned for our well-being? Or do we feel like we're on our own and we have to take care of number one and we pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps? That mentality is more a scarcity mentality, where we feel like there's not enough to go around and we have to take care of ourselves. And this video from the Bible Project does a fantastic job explaining the difference between the two and helping us realize that God is indeed our generous host, and we can be generous because He is generous. Join me in the next video where we'll talk about chapter 6, the mystery of the name.